Chapter 5, Ratios and Proportions. Today we are going to be talking about ratios in lesson 5.1. So a ratio uses division to compare two numbers. So that doesn't really give us that much information, but let's look at some examples here. There are three different ways to write ratios. 18 to 13, so using the word 2, using a colon, 18 to 13, or 18 to 13. This is probably the most common way you'll see this. In word problems, you'll often see it with the word 2. So the amount of boys in our class to girls in our class is 18 to 13. So it uses two different quantities and it compares them. Two ratios are equivalent when they have the same value. So if you can write a ratio in fraction form and simplify it and the value is the same, then they would be considered equivalent ratios. So let's go ahead and look at this problem right here. There are 26 girls, 21 boys, and 7 counselors at camp. Write all three ways. So what is the ratio of girls to boys? So it's important that you understand what is going to go first. So here girls came first, so I need to put the quantity of girls first. So 26, 2, and then the quantity of boys was 21. 21. Now in the direction it says to write it all three ways. So now I need to use my colon, 26 to 21, and as a fraction, 26 to 21. And the next part says, what is the ratio of campers to counselors? So the campers would include both the girls and the boys. So for this, it's a two-part problem. So first, I'd have to add up how many girls I have with boys to get my total number of counselors, and that would give me 47. So campers was 47, 2, and then counselors was up here, 7. And now I need to write it with a colon, so 47, 2, 7, and the last way as a fraction, 47 to 7. Okay, so you drive 3 3/4 hours for 45-minute meeting. What is the ratio of driving time to meeting time? So here I'm going to have to turn this number, and then I have this number right here. So this is already in a fraction, but I'm going to turn it into a decimal. So that would be 3.75. That is in hours. And then I have this in minutes. So if I want to compare these, I need to make sure that I have the same unit. So 3 hours would be 3 times 60, which would give me 180 minutes. And then 3/4 of an hour. So I can figure out one of two ways. So you can do 3/4 times 60, because that's how many minutes there are, over 1. And when I multiply across, I could cross simplify this, or when I multiply across and divide, I'd get 45 minutes. So now I have 45 minutes and 180 minutes, so I need to add that together. I'm going to erase some of my work right here. So I'm going to add 180 plus 45, and that will give me a total of 225. So now I have 225 minutes to 45 minutes. Now it's important that you don't actually include the units here. That was my mistake. You only want to have the numbers when you're comparing ratios. So 225 to 45, and then I could write it as a fraction, 225 to 45. Now notice that this is not in simplest form. So first is write a comparison, write as ratio, and then reduce it. I could divide both of these by 5, and the top, that would give me 45 when I divide by 5, then divide by 5 here, and I'd get 9. And then I could do 45 divided by 3, and that would give me 15 over 3. So that is one way to do it. The other way is you could have, from the very beginning, up here before you wrote your fractions, simplify them all and then written those ratios. Okay, comparing ratios. Heather owns 27 hats, 9 are red. Greg owes 18 hats, 10 are red. Who has a greater ratio of red hats to total hats? So first I need to pay attention to what they're asking me. So red hats, I'm going to do Heather's on this side, and then I'm going to do Craig's on this side. So Heather owns a total of 9 hats, and then red hats, and then 27 total hats. And Craig owns a total of 10 red hats and 18 altogether. So these are the two ratios, but next I need to simplify them. So if I divide these both by 9, I'd get 1, 2, 3. So this is my ratio in simplest form. And then here I can divide them both by 2, so I'd get 5 to 9. Now, I cannot compare these yet because they don't have a common, well, right now if I put them as a fraction, it would be 1/3 to 5/9, and they don't have a common denominator. So over here, I can multiply this by 3, and then I'd get my numerator as 3 and my denominator as 9. So you can see that Craig has a greater ratio of red hats to total hats. And that's why it said write in fraction form. And then here it says you can write the ratio as a decimal. So we found a common denominator, but you could have also written this as a decimal. So I could have done 1/3, and to turn that into a decimal, you go in and out. 3 can't go into 1, but if you add a decimal, it can go into 10 3 times. And this is going to be a repeating decimal, because when I subtract 9, I'll get 1, I'll bring down a 0, so 0.33333. And then if I do 5/9 in and out, so 5 divided by 9. 9 cannot go into 5, so I add a decimal. 9 can go into 50 a total of 5 times. I get 45. When I subtract, I get another 5. So this is going to be a repeating decimal of 5s. So you can still see either way I did it, Craig had the larger total ratio. Okay, here I want you guys to pause. You're going to write each of these in simplest form in the form they give it to you. Correction, I want you to write them in simplest form as a fraction. So if it's not in a fraction already, go ahead and turn it into a fraction and then write it in simplest form. Go ahead and start. Okay, so we're going to go through these one by one. So the first one was 9 to 5, so I wrote that as a fraction, as 9 over 5. And since there is no common factor of 9 and 5, that was already in simplest form. The next one was 54 to 72, and that was already in a fraction form, so I just needed to simplify it. So what I did here is I first divided by 9, and 54 divided by 9 gave me 6, and 72 divided by 9 gave me 8. And then I realized that there was still more I could divide out, so I divided by 2 and 2, and that gave me 3/4. And the last one was 30 to 75. So I wrote that in fraction form, 30 over 75, and I divided by 5, and I got 6 over 15. And then I still had to divide by 3, because I had a common factor of 3, and I got 2/5. So that would be writing it in simplest form. Okay, so for these ones, you are going to compare the fractions. So the first thing you want to do is write them as a fraction. So they are ratios, and you're going to write them as a fraction. And then you're going to write them in simplest form. So the first one, 18 over 12, I can divide by 6. And when I divide by 6, I get 3 over 2. And then over here, I can divide by 9. And when I divide by 9, I get 6 over 4. And then I could divide by 2 on both the top and the bottom. and that would give me 3/2. So I can see that both these fractions are equal, so you'd call these equivalent ratios or equivalent fractions. The next one here, I'd have 81/63, and I could divide these both by 9. And when I do 81 divided by 9, I get 9. And then 63 divided by 9 is 7. So this is 9/7. And then 60/35, I can divide those both by 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. 35 divided by 5 is 7. So I have 9/7 and 12/7. So 12/7 is larger. My denominators are both the same, but this numerator is greater. So that's how I would compare those two. And this is like the lesson we did back in the beginning of chapters 1 and 2. You're going to order them from least to greatest. So the first thing you need to do is write them all as fractions. And then I would make them all have a common denominator. Don't forget that you're going to want these in original form. So a common denominator between 3, 5, and 19 is, a common denominator between 3, 5, and 9 is 45. So this one I have to times by 15. 3 times 15 gives me 45. 4 times 15 gives me 60. This one I times them both by 9. 5 times 9 gives me 45. 6 times 9 gives me 54. And then here I'm going to times these by 5. So that would give me 55 as my numerator and 45 as my denominator. So I can see that this one is the largest, and I want to go from least to greatest. So my smallest one would be this one here, and then this one, and then this one. And remember, I need to do them in original form. So I do 6 to 5, and then 11 to 9, and then last would be 4 to 3. And that is it for today's lesson.